Ali Beikzadeh. How are you, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Dude, I'm great. I'm super excited. I I'm going to start by reading a quote from something you sent me in a voice memo. We've been going back and forth. And then I'm going to have you introduce yourself. But I want to read this first. And you said you aren't a historian. You aren't an economist. You are a passionate Iranian who cares about your ancestral homeland, and you hold it dear to your heart. The love and connection between Iranian and Israeli people need to be amplified more. And man, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast to amplify your voice and your message, and to also show people that the Iranian people and the Israeli people stand together against a common enemy, the Islamic Republic regime in Iran. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell your story, your family story, your people's story, and we'll just go with it from there. So, welcome to the podcast, brother. Who are you? Fill everybody
Thank
in.
you, brother. Really appreciate you having me. As I've told you before you having me here, I don't really have much of an interesting story, or rather, should I say, traumatic or tragic upbringing or story of relatives and family. In reality, I've had the best life here in Australia. No offense, the best country in the world. I'm a first generation immigrant. My family and I, we left Iran as immigrants following shortly after the Iran-Iraq War, the 8 years of misery that my country and Iraqis had to endure, many of which the blame goes to Khomeini himself, the founder of the Islamic regime occupying our beloved homeland today. So several years after the Iran-Iraq War, we left the country, and I've lived the best life in Australia. That's all I can say as far as my story is concerned. Just to add to that quote that I mentioned to you in a voice note, I'm not even interested in geopolitics and all those things either. I don't want to be doing this. And frankly, to be honest with you, I've spoken to heaps of Israelis as well as heaps of Iranians who have fled the country and are living here in Australia or anywhere in the diaspora community. None of them want to be doing this. They'd rather be pursuing their passion. In my case, my passion is wildlife advocacy, animal rights, environmental conservation, and in fact, one facet of that is observing my own ancestral homeland being decimated, with its biodiversity loss and environmental destruction, all these like historical and culturally profound areas that have been profound for thousands upon thousands of years, just frankly go to shit because of this regime. So all these reasons just pile up, and it gives me a reason to say, no, we have to talk about this. Enough is enough.
Dude, I love that. I think it's really important. It's like you're not like an activist by trade. You're not like, this isn't what you do. This is a completely separate thing that you're seeing, and I would imagine, I'm sure we'll talk about it, that you're seeing people all over the world who don't know anything about Iran, have never said a word about Iran, have never studied it for a second, out of nowhere making outrageous posts and outrageous claims supporting the terrorists that are destroying Iran and hurting your people and making your people suffer. And I would imagine that that's what's pulling you into speaking up about it and be like, you guys have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. Precisely. I want to start off by saying anecdotally, and then we'll expand upon the actual geopolitics. Anecdotally, let's just talk about the past 2-3 weeks. I have received nothing but overwhelming amounts of love and compassion and friendship from my fellow Jewish and Israeli compatriots, right? Conversely, on the other hand, what about the Islamist or Islamic regime sympathizers? I, alongside many others, have only received violent threats and nothing more. Now, let's assume it was the other way around, and I was a pro-regime sympathizer, and I was spilling all this, like, let's say, anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic rhetoric, would I be receiving the same sorts of violent threats? And my confident answer will be absolutely not. So that's, I guess, the anecdotal version of the past 2-3 weeks of my experience. I can wholeheartedly say that the past 3 weeks has been very tough as an Iranian, especially as part of the Iranian diaspora, because not only are we confused with this roller coaster of emotions, but also we're having to deal with all these people who want to act like Western saviors, and they're quote unquote speaking up for Iran, but at least use the right vernacular. You're speaking up for Iran, you're speaking up for the Islamic regime. If you're going to say that, at least use the right language. Speak up for the Islamic regime. Don't care. Do not put the word Iran within your mouth, when the regime themselves don't even associate with themselves with Iran. In fact, they are anti-Iranian. No need to go any further than their leaders and the figures of authority, the mullahs, the clerics, within their own bloody constitution. It is anti-Iranian. So if you want to speak up for Iran, listen to Iranians. Talk to Iranians before anything. Sorry for getting emotional, but
no,
that might
dude,
be happening right
that's
now.
I fucking preach, dude. Can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
For people who don't know and they want to learn more, because my audience, I have to say, is an incredible group of people. They just want to learn. They want to learn more. They want to understand more. Can you explain what Iran was like pre the regime's takeover, and then what is the regime like now? Like, what do the Iranian people live under within this regime? Just so they have a better understanding of the vernacular and what they're actually speaking about and what they're hearing about.
Okay. And this answer will go to the Western liberals, right?
Okay.
The Western liberals who value freedom of expression and freedom of clothing, freedom of speech, the freedom to vote, the freedom to basically do almost whatever the fuck you want, okay? This answer is to you. Pre-1979, okay, let's go back to between 1925 to 1979, which in a nutshell was the Pahlavi era. And before I answer this question, just know that I'm not even a monarchist in the conventional form. So I'm going to be completely objective here. In one word, the Pahlavi era was rather an acceleration of modern Iran to turn it into, let's call it the Singapore or the South Korea of the Middle East, right? With all its cultural and historical and architectural and engineering facets that it has, right? From building the Iranian railway to steel manufacturing, and obviously Iran is home to the second largest reserves of gas and the third largest reserves of oil. Now, obviously, as an environmentalist, I wholeheartedly believe we should be moving away from fossil fuels, but that's for another debate. And Iran, in fact, is home to being a world-class area of renewable energy. But again, that's for another debate. When you have a regime that doesn't even know how to utilize its own fossil fuels, I don't even know if they're capable of renewable energy, let alone nuclear, which is another topic, right? So look, pre-1979, like I said, in one word, acceleration. You have a country, Iran, which is arguably one of the oldest civilizations ever, okay? It is home to some of the greatest innovations and entrepreneurship and inventions and philosophy and science and mathematics and music and art and poetry, and the fucking list goes on, right? But then between 1925 and 1979, you have this period of like modern acceleration, because obviously the British Empire at the time was far ahead. So the Pahlavis, Reza Shah and his son Mohammad Reza Shah, they looked to secularize Iran away from the clergy and fundamentalism. They actually, Reza Shah, looked at Ataturk of Turkey, which, following the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Ataturk wanted to also modernize Turkey and secularize it. And obviously the Turkish model is one to follow and one to be inspired by. The Turkish model did fantastically. Not to suggest that Erdogan is great right now. He's also another fuckwit that's trying to take Turkey back to the Ottoman Empire. But anyways, one obstacle that Iran had to face that Turkey didn't, because the Ottoman Empire collapsed, thereby collapsing the Islamization of Turkey. The one obstacle that Iran had to face and confront was the clergy, as we call them, the ulama. So that was arguably the biggest fallback for us Iranians. And the clergy in Iran specifically followed the 12 Shiite ideology, right? So Shiite Islamism, not Sunni Islamism. If you go back in history, there's this rivalry between the Shiites and the Sunnis, and specifically between the Safavid era, which was like the 16th century. I'm not going to go too much into the history of it and bore people out. But yeah, in a nutshell, Iran 1979, pre-1979 era, we had the obstacle of the clergy. Now, the Pahlavis, they were modernizing Iran so much, right? And I'll just give you a few examples. Women had suffrage rights before fucking Switzerland did, and shortly following France.
I actually didn't even know that. I didn't know that.
I know that. Yeah. So when you look at Iran today, a lot of people assume that, you know, it's just a bunch of desert monkeys in fucking ninja costumes. Pretty much this, right? It's far from the truth, right? Literacy rates exponentially rise, and this is the reason why I mentioned the whole like profoundness of our civilization and all the innovations is because that is genuinely our indigenous culture, to build and to coexist and to love and to dance with one another. This whole Islamist culture was preventing that from taking place and accelerating. So all this acceleration was taking place. And another thing that actually happened that the Shah did was he took away the feudalist system that existed, right? Because the clerics actually owned masses of lands, particularly farms. And he took that away from them and he handed the land to the peasants at the time. So in many ways, the monarchs were left-leaning, right? I could argue that they were actually left-leaning nationalists, that they were patriotic about their culture and their heritage and their nation, but rather the clerics wanted to prevent that from happening. So they didn't like the fact, the clerics didn't like the fact that women got suffrage rights, that women's literacy rates particularly were rising exponentially. They didn't like these things. They wanted to prevent that from taking place. And therefore, today, whenever you hear like Western liberals telling you, oh, because of the Islamic regime, and I've seen this common trend by heaps of these like fucking bloggers, they're like, oh, you know, literacy rates in Iran are like 98, 99%, as well as women. Yeah, that's because the Pahlavi era like founded that, put together those pillars, and you've probably heard of the name the White Revolution, which started essentially in the 1960s, which accelerated this mass industrialization and infrastructure and building and railway systems and all these diversity of things that was modernizing the country so much. But then you had also several factors involved. You had literally, both physically and metaphorically, all these different ideologies and different nations trying to finger Iran from Russia to the Brits to America to Islamism to Marxism and the Soviet ideology. You had all these different things taking place. So while the Shah was trying to modernize and accelerate Iran into a better society, you had all these things taking place as well. So when you put yourself objectively in the Shah's shoes, you come to think of it like, fuck, man, he had to deal with some shit. Now, again, I'm not even a monarchist, but I'm speaking from objective reality. From when you start reading, you start to mature and realize, you know what, we fucked up. We fucked up with this whole 1979, and I don't even like to call it a revolution. It was an Islamic coup. We can get into that. Following the 1979 revolution, where do I start? Let's start with women's rights. Where are they? I can't even find any women's rights. To start, I guess you can say constitutionally women are viewed as literally half the value of a man in terms of like in the court of law. They have half the value of testimony. Iran today, even today, has the highest number of executions in the world per capita, right? And if you weren't to take it by per capita, it'll be shortly after China. And that's for obvious reasons. China has the highest population in the world. Again, so per capita has the highest number of political prisoners. Predominantly, if we look at like Evin prison, you've probably heard of Evin before. Evin prison, we actually call it Doneshkoye Evin, like Evin University, because it has the largest number of intellectuals. All the brains are within that prison, right? And activists and whatnot. It is a living hell. You have such high rates of suicide and depression. I talk to many people myself, and they're like, we have nothing to lose anymore. And that's why when you see these uprisings take place, the degree of courage that you see in young women, especially like even 15 or 16 years old, they're like, that's it, this is it, I've got nothing to lose. So I'm going out in the streets. It's me versus a bunch of fuckwit Basijis. And I can tell you what a Basiji is as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
I guess life under the Islamic regime is a living hell. You don't have freedom of speech. You can't speak up against the regime. It is a totalitarian, theocratic, Islamo-fascist. In many ways, it is a communist sort of structure as well. In fact, I've always thought about this. The Islamic regime in Iran is unique in the sense that it has combined all different types of totalitarian and dictatorship regimes together, such that it is unique in its own sense. So that's life under the Islamic regime. There's so much to say, but I'll leave it short as that is.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just want to clarify, just because I think it's important so people really understand this. Like, you're in Australia now, but if you were in Iran, you wouldn't be able to have this conversation. This conversation, like, number one, because they've shut down communications, they've shut down the internet, they shut down phones. But like, I mean, if you had this type of conversation, this type of critic of the regime, you'd be killed or thrown in prison. Is that right?
100%, no doubt about it. And
so, like, when you say there's no freedom of speech, you literally mean that the stuff that when people are out, and I'm sure you see it in Australia, I see it here in the United States, and it's good to protest your government. It's good to speak your mind, but also don't forget that the fact that you can protest your government and then go home immediately after and not worry about you being killed, your family being killed, you being thrown in prison, the fact that you can do that, it means that your country is living a better country, is a true model of freedom relative to what people are suffering in Iran.
Indeed. So again, anecdotally, I'm generally like a conventionally left-leaning atheist, right? So already, as is, without me even saying anything, apostasy laws would apply to me because I've left the religion of Islam, and blasphemy laws, right? If we look at all Islamic countries, to a certain degree, obviously, each of them differ in some ways or another, but stringent penalties do exist for blasphemy, right? Speaking up against the Prophet Muhammad, for example, or the holy texts and all these sorts of things. Now, if we take Iran, obviously Iran under the occupied by the Islamic regime is one of those more fundamental examples where you can't say nothing, right? Even remotely critical, especially of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. So no, me doing what I do, I would not be surviving a single day in freedom under that regime. And frankly, all these things just make me more and more grateful of the best life that I have in this country. And yes, absolutely, we should be critical wherever we live. All ideologies, all governments, all cabinets should be subject to criticism, no matter what they are. And that's the beauty of freedom of speech, right? The more you actually analyze this entire notion of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, you come to realize how critical it is. As a naturalist myself, I love to study or analyze and observe different species of animals. And us, as a species of Homo sapiens, we're a very, very expressive, social, loving species. We have to express ourselves. Otherwise, how are we going to live?
Yeah. And can you talk about, you brought up these unbelievably brave young women. Can you talk about the woman life freedom movement, which in your words, I even wrote it down. You said the woman life freedom movement, you called it the greatest women's led revolution ever. I want more people to understand it because a lot of these people who are standing up for the regime and maybe without realizing it, they're also the ones who are very pro women's rights. They want women to be able to express themselves freely. Apparently. And they didn't say a fucking word during the woman life freedom movement. And I don't even know if they know what it is. So can you talk about it?
Absolutely. So that's probably been the biggest thing that's been hurting us, and it's been hurting me, frankly, so much, to witness so many of these people who never said a single fucking word during literally the greatest, and I don't mean that as an exaggeration. It was, at least in modern or contemporary history, the greatest women's-led uprising or revolution of our time. Right? Never have we had, in recent times, a revolution led by women and joined by men. And I would actually argue feminism is, in its core, should be accompanied by men, right? Because where is that feminism without good masculinity? Now, regarding the 2002 Women Life Freedom movement, I guess in short, it started as a result of the catalyst was the killing of Mahsa Jina Amini, who was a Kurdish Iranian woman who was traveling to Tehran. And obviously the Kurds are a ethnic minority, one of the largest ethnic minorities in Iran, who are heavily persecuted alongside the Baluchis and several other religious and ethnic minorities like the Jews, like the Baha'is. They're not treated so well. So being Kurdish already isn't a good sign. As she traveled to Tehran, she had several strands of hair showing, and she was actually wearing her hijab, but it was labeled as like not the correct hijab. So in short, she was taken by the morality police. And if you don't know, there's such a thing called the morality police, which is technically the hijab police. Like they monitor women to see if they're wearing the correct attire. And you're literally taken in a van and they go and sort of interrogate you, ask questions. In many cases, there's been many cases of women being beaten, raped, sexually abused, and they're either let go, or in this case, in Mahsa's case, she was beaten to the point where she suffered such head trauma that she died following closely going to the hospital. And that really started an uprising called the Woman Life Freedom Movement. Woman Life Freedom itself is a slogan that started on as a Kurdish slogan, Jen Jian Azadi. And there's so much philosophy behind it, really. I find it so fascinating. And really, when you study all revolutions, they come with one core slogan, which is usually 3 particular words. For example, the French Revolution was liberté, égalité, fraternité. So like liberty, fraternity, equality. And you look at every revolution, there's some slogan that was the core of that revolution. And the Woman Life Freedom uprising was that. And it resulted in tens of thousands of political prisoners and hundreds of people that were killed, right? Many of which were teenagers, children, women, just to name a few: Hadis Najafi, Sarina Esmailzadeh, Nika Shah Karami, which is such a sad case where she was beaten by the Basij. The Basij is a plain-clothes sort of volunteer regime force where they're probably vilified the most within Iranian society because of what they've done and what they do to innocent Iranians. So in the case of Nika Shah Karami, for example, she was taken and beaten and butchered up so much such that when they handed her body back to her family, the only way her family were able to determine that was her body was by her birthmark, not because of her face. She was butchered that badly. So, yeah, really, that uprising, I would argue, following September 2022, was the most prominent of all Iranian uprisings against the regime. More or less, there's been about 10 different uprisings since the 1979 Islamic coup. And this one was arguably the most prominent one. And it has resulted in some positive outcomes in the sense that the world finally understands what this regime is. But those who act ignorant, them being the Western liberals who are now standing for the regime, they're either well aware of what they're doing and they're just feeding their moral narcissism, or they're just lost. They're just lost, and they're trying to find a sense of belonging, this sense of tribalism, and hence why you see a lot of these protesters coming out in support of Hamas. When you have LGBT, pro-Hamas, and all these things,
the queer is for yeah.
Dude, it fucking blows my mind. Like, and I know some of these people. It's like, holy shit. Where do I even start with that? I hope that answers your question there.
Yeah, dude.
There's a lot to go in depth, but yeah, that's in a nutshell regarding the 2022 movement.
You know, it's the thing that just it boggles my mind is that during the Woman Life Freedom movement, I didn't see any of these people who stand to say I'm social justice, like women's equality, freedom. I didn't see any of these people holding up the Iranian flag, whether it was the regime's flag or the Iranian people's flag. I didn't see any of them out protesting. I didn't see any of them posting. The only time that I've seen in recent years that these people talking about Iran is once Israel has stepped in after the regime sent hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles into Israeli territory.
Yeah. Iran has the right to defend itself.
Yeah, what do you make of that when people are saying that? What goes through your mind?
I repeat, don't you fucking dare speak of Iran. Don't you dare put Iran within your mouth. If you want to say the Islamic regime has the right to defend itself, Say whatever the fuck you want, because they're our enemies anyway. But don't you dare put the word Iran within your mouth when you don't know anything about Iran, when you don't know anything about the Iranian people, when you didn't say a single fucking word about Iranians and Iran whilst we had an actual enemy. But right now, because of your hatred of Jews and Israel, and they're going to say, no, it's not anti-Semitism, it's this and that. They just sound like a fucking child when they talk. But now they have the audacity to say something. At least have the indecency to use the correct vernacular. Mm-hmm. And there's so much to go through there. And this is when I'd say there's a psychotherapist by the name of Beikzadeh Afsahi. She put together a really, really good article just last week, I believe. And she says that Iranians are currently stuck in a psychological vice, such that not only we have our primary enemy, that is the Islamic regime, but also we're having to deal with the externalities of it as the diaspora community, because you have Western liberals coming to us saying Iran has the right to defend itself, take them on. It's like, no, shut the fuck up. Israelis were never my enemy. Israel was never my enemy, nor should they ever be. In fact, I would argue throughout the entire history of humanity, and I challenge anyone to this question, I've asked this several times, when have the Jews or the Israelis ever done anything to Iranians or Iran? Ever. You can maybe argue the case for other nations or other ethnicities or other ideologies, but when have the Jews ever done anything? Why should they be my enemy? And you'd lead to the crux of the issue, and that is this regime has created us this enemy, that is the Jews, right? The Zionists, Israel. And I ask why? Again, like, why should they be? Because it goes back to that notion of divide and conquer. Because if you have an ideology that doesn't create enemies, then the people will realize the enemy, the primary enemy is the regime oppressing them. And what's analogous to that is Nazism, right? The Nazi regime came in between the Soviets and the West, saying the primary, the core of the issue is the Jews. We need to eradicate them. And that's what they did, right? Holocaust comes, and then all these things happen. The West didn't take them seriously. World War I happens. Before you know it, 1939, Nazis invade Poland. It's already too late. The exact same thing, the exact same playbook is happening today. So when I see Western liberals saying all these dumb things, it's like, I already know if we continue down this same playbook, you're on their target as well. It just so happens that you're next after me and Israel. You're next, don't worry. But if you don't take this seriously, as you should be, and if you're only going to feed your own moral narcissism and your egotistic nature today, don't worry, in the future, they'll go after you as well. Just watch.
You know, you said something. I went through a bunch of your content, which I love, and I'll share your Instagram handle in the show notes. But one thing that you said is, I think people hear Islamist, and they just think that you're being Islamophobic. They think that you're hating on Islam, when in reality, they don't understand the difference between Islam and Islamist. And you even said that Muslims are some of the biggest victims of very strict Islamic states, including the Iranian regime. Can you talk about the difference between Islam and Islamism, and can you help people understand how peaceful Muslims are some of the greatest victims of these radical Islamic states?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to be putting a series together comparing secular Islam or secular Muslims to Islamists, right? And I've talked about Islamophobia as well. But just to start, there's so much to say about this topic because I'm so fascinated by it and I talk about it so much, but I'll try and summarize it as best as possible. Let's start by saying that there's two types of Islam, right? There's the spiritual Islam or the philosophical Islam, and then there's political Islam. Spiritual Islam, a lot of the factors behind it, I actually respect deeply. One of them being the discipline aspect of it, right? And you yourself as a fitness coach will know that well, getting the right amount of sleep, exercising, eating right, respecting your body, no drinking, no smoking, no doing drugs, and all these Dude,
things. Even like Ramadan is so unbelievably impressive. It's like, it's actually like, and that's just one aspect of it. I completely agree with you.
Awesome. Yeah. Fasting and all these things, refraining yourself from, a lot of sexual behavior, abstinence and all these things is awesome. That's the spiritual side of it. The unfortunate reality is, when we look at the fundamentalist aspect of Islam, the politicization of it is a mutually exclusive component. So it has to be political, right? And obviously that's the same as the Old Testament and the New Testament, but obviously they reformed and they decided to secularize themselves. Islam today is still going through that process and it's still younger compared to their other Abrahamic counterparts. And we're still going through this secularization of Islam. And this is where I say secular Muslims, and I honestly mean this, they are some of the most kind and trustworthy people you ever meet. Right?
They're incredible. They're incredible. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And many friends of mine in Israel are secular Muslims, spiritual Muslims, I would say. Like they rejecting the politicization of it. But I completely agree.
Yeah. Are very consistent in their values. They have principle. You can trust them. On the other hand, I know heaps of, and I say this as an atheist myself, I know heaps of atheists that they're just fucking all over the place with their values. You can't trust them. You're like, dude, you're so inconsistent, no integrity. So that's the fact with secular Muslims, right? I put them aside as being some of the best people. Islamists, on the other hand, and this is where I make this clear distinction between secular Muslims and Islamists. Islamists are the kind that seek to expand the ideology of Islam across the globe and establish the corresponding caliphate. In the Shiite case, it's called an imamate. In the Sunni case, it's called a caliphate. Same shit. Same shit, dude. So that's the clear distinction. And then there's obviously three pillars when it comes to Islamism. The first is that they don't consider borders. They don't consider sovereign nationality. It's only a globalist world of Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kafir, which just means the land of Islamists and land of infidels, right? That's their only distinction. And then the second thing is an Islamic state must be established, right? Only Islamic state and nothing else. And then the third pillar is establishing Sharia law throughout those lands. And if we look at many of the quotes of Khomeini himself, the founder of the Islamic regime occupying Iran, he blatantly made the claim, like I said, and there's many other figures of authority, that they are anti-Iranian. They're against being Iranian and any philosophy behind what being Iranian stands for. They desire to establish their imamate and expand across the lands. It's written within their own constitution. You need to look no further than that they seek to disseminate, establish an Islamic state across the globe. Hence the whole rivalry between Sunnis and Shiites. So I guess that's the clear difference between a secular Muslim or secular Islam versus fundamentalist Islam or political Islam. And that's what we're against. We're not against Muslims. We're not against them practicing their own spirituality, praying and all that sort of stuff. And that's why you actually see, you know of Sufism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Sufism is sort of the branch of Islam which is much more explicitly meditational and spiritual. So you see a lot of fundamentalists being against the Sufis because they like music, they like dancing, they like the
Massacring
spiritual
them.
aspect. Sorry?
Yeah. They massacre them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, they're heavily persecuted as well. They're bullied. They're not treated well. And so if you talk to an Islamist here in the West, and there's plenty in Australia that I've talked to myself, and I've asked them, like, wholeheartedly, just be honest with me, dude. I'm an apostate. I'm a blasphemer. I criticize Islam, and as should all our ideas should be as well. If Australia were to be converted to a Sharia state, should I be killed? And they'll tell you, well, they'll try to like beat around the bush with their words, but in a nutshell, they'll be like, yeah, you know, under the law, there would be an Islamic jurist, Yes. It's like, okay, go fuck yourself then. Why should I respect you? And wholeheartedly, you don't deserve to be living here. And that's another thing, when I say it, it comes across as racist. And that's the other thing with Islamophobia, right? This term Islamophobia, and it's another thing that I've been like reading about a lot. The term itself was created by Islamists, right? In order
Which makes sense.
It's a strong and genius tool of theirs. It was used by Islamists, many of which was used by the IRGC, the Islamic regime in Iran, to make Islam inviolate. The French philosopher Pascal Bruckner observed this himself. He realized that they wanted to make Islam associated with a race, and so when you do criticize it in any way, it makes you somehow a xenophobe or a racist. It's this false dichotomy, but they forgot the third alternative, and the third alternative is that no, it's just an ideology. Would I be labeled a racist if I were to be criticizing the Christian doctrine or the Jewish doctrine or Marxism, feminism, veganism? I'm a vegan. I encourage people to challenge and take the piss into it as much as you want, because that's what's going to bring engagement and conversation. So like this idea that you can't criticize an ideology is exactly what allowed Nazism to flourish. So again, I repeat, if you want to play that naive behavior and not be and want to be politically correct, then kindly get fucked. 'Cause I'm not having a car, but...
I fucking love you, bro. I absolutely love you. I think my audience at this point can be like, I understand why Jordan brought this guy on. For the people who don't understand it, they don't understand Sharia. They don't understand how this could even be a thing, especially people who grew up in the West, unbelievably privileged to be living such a true free life. I don't think they can fully understand what that practically means. And you even said they might not be coming for you yet, but you're just next on the list. Can you explain what, just a couple, just so people can have a basic understanding what life under Sharia would look like if the regime had its way, if they were able to establish a caliphate, if they were able to do this? What does life look like?
Yep. In the same way that the Nazis were ignored and they were treated as like, you know, they'll reform over time and they'll become peaceful. And that's exactly what didn't happen. Over 50 million innocent lives killed later. Only then we realize that it may be ideal not to attempt to try and pacify Nazism. And that's the same with Islamism. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that not only obviously within Iran it's an Islamic occupying force, but also within the Middle East with all their proxies, and their ideology is disseminating across the West. You have plenty of institutions within the West that are being flooded with these sort of doctrines and indoctrination in order to recruit individuals into their forces, educational systems, money laundering, and all these different cases where they're doing these things. And of course, assassination attempts against activists and all these things. Now, we can also see, look at Europe right now. I'm actually scared to see...
Dude, it's wild.
Europe, fucking Europe, France, the UK, Glastonbury. Dude, it blows my mind. And you see in the UK that they want to introduce Islamophobia laws such that you can't criticize Islam and there'd be stringent penalties against it. These are the first steps. It's not like they're going to come and all of a sudden just put together Sharia law. No, they're much smarter than that. It's sort of like the Islamic regime gaining access to a nuclear weapon. They're not just going to blow Israel up straight away. It doesn't work like that. Once they have a nuclear weapon, they're going to use that as a means and as a tool to say, okay, no one can touch us now since we have nuclear arsenal. So we're going to continue expanding. And let's assume, hypothetically, they were successful in expanding their caliphate or imamate. Then they're not going to need to use nuclear weapons. But fact of the matter is, and they say this, it's part of their doctrine, they love death more than we love life. They glorify death, I repeat, they glorify death more than we love life. So when they say these things, why don't we take it seriously? Especially when they actually act upon it, right? And hence, when if they were to establish Sharia law, I mean, what does that entail? No freedom of speech. And this is where we take a lot of these things granted. We take it for granted. I know heaps of Westerners growing up in Australia or wherever, they're just not interested in voting. They're not interested in the democratic system. And that's simply because they don't understand the other side of the spectrum. They take it for granted. And frankly, this is where I'm so grateful to be a first generation immigrant. Because yes, I grew up as an Australian, but I also saw the other side of the spectrum. I saw what my parents had to endure and what my other compatriots had to endure in order to gain access to that freedom, the hardship that they had to go through and whatnot. Whereas you had people growing up here and they're just not interested in voting. They don't care. When you say these things to them, they make it seem as it's like some dystopian conspiracy theory. It's not. It's literally right fucking there. I'm not a conspiracist myself. Just Google it, bro. Women. The funniest thing. I've seen women recently. Last week, I went to a regime protest just to, record stuff. I saw women in like crop tops and stuff, alongside pictures of Khomeini, and the Islamic flag. I've seen like Al-Qaeda and Taliban flags. And this is where you realize, and I say it every single time, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah, IRGC, they're all the same shit. The only difference, the only underlying factor that the IRGC has going for them is their ability to spill propaganda, just as the Nazis had. And this is where the power of ideology and propaganda comes into play. And this is where the dangers of ideology is. No matter how much you weaken their physical and military capability, in fact, until you get the fucking job done, their ideology is strengthened. And I would argue you're just giving them more of a test and steroidal boost, right? Because they see it as martyrdom. They see it as, okay, we're succeeding now, so let's keep going. So unless you get the job done, they're going to keep going. And this is where a lot of our advocacy and activism is actually centered around stop appeasing this ideology. You cannot rationalize Nazism, so why are you trying to rationalize Islamism? You cannot pacify Nazism, so why are you trying to pacify Islamism via business deals and hoping that they're going to try and reform themselves when they believe that they saw the supreme leader's face on the fucking moon? Don't think they're going to stop executing people for saying something against that very corresponding supreme leader. It just blows my mind, dude. And then you think like these same liberals, right? They find this marriage of convenience with the Islamists, right? And this is where we talk about the whole concept of unholy alliance between the Marxists and the Islamists, because they find this common goal, this common trait of anti-Western sentiment and anti-Western hatred, and thereby coming together at the time because it's a marriage of convenience. But once the Islamists take supremacy, you're fucked. And I'm not making this up. Just look at contemporary history. Just look at what happened in Iran in 1979 and following 1979. They mass slaughtered leftists and anyone who was secular and left-leaning. And all the evidence is there, really. All the evidence is there. And we're seeing the exact same playbook happen today. These so-called progressives are teaming up with the Islamists. Why? Simply because they're blinded by their hatred of Israel and Jews, because they've been manipulated by that Islamist ideology. And it's horrific, to say the least.
Man, you're on point. Thank you for sharing all of this. I want to ask you. There's a couple more things I want to add. There's a lot more things, but I also want to be respectful of your time. But there's one thing that you said that I think is really important for people to hear. And I want to dive into it a little bit. So you said the fact that Iranians are more fearful of a ceasefire should tell you everything that you need to know. And this ceasefire is specifically referring to Israel stopping the bombing of the nuclear facilities, of the regime's facilities. And obviously, every innocent Iranian's death is horrific. But you brought up a point, and actually posts from Iranians in Iran talking about how they are more scared of Israel stopping than they are of basically they're more scared of Israel stopping, because if they stop, that gives the regime, it means the regime isn't toppled and the regime has the power to take it out on its civilians. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So again, this goes back to the historical evidence and the same playbook that this regime has played upon since their inception. Every single time there has been an uprising, and let's assume, for several cases, the people of Iran have taken the regime to the brink of collapse, right? And up until they've almost collapsed, what has other Western governments done? Appeased them, given them business deals, and literally, metaphorically, rescued their ass. And then what happens when they do that? The regime can't exert its force against Israel. It can't exert its force against America or many other forces throughout the globe. So who does it exert its force upon?
The people.
The people. The first and foremost victims of the Islamo-fascist regime are the Iranians. And that's why we say Iranians are more fearful of a ceasefire than the quote-unquote war itself. It's not a war between Iran and Israel. It's a war between the Islamic regime and the world. It's a war between their death cult-based ideology and Iranians, thereby bringing others into the case and then and then getting the world to stand up for Iran or anything like that. In reality, we've been at war. Iran has been at war for 46 years now. Everybody's neglected that war. But the moment that Israel decided to act in its own sovereign interest, everyone's talking about it because of their blind hatred for Israel. And it's despicable. And with that, I want to make the clear distinction, because a lot of people have been saying this, obviously. I want to make the clear distinction between foreign interference and independent uprising. So Israel has been acting in its own sovereign interest. They have every right to do so. When you have an ideology and a regime who literally every single day since its inception is saying death to the West, death to America, death to England, death to Israel, every single day, alongside many other facets, you better believe them, especially when they act upon it, right? So Israel is acting in its own interest. All we're saying, and arguably the majority of Iranians have this view, while this is taking place, we take the ample opportunity to act upon it and topple this regime. That's all we're saying. No one is pro-foreign interference. And in fact, I would argue that foreign interference has taken place the past 46 years when the West continues to rescue this regime. So why don't you talk about that? Instead of ignoring our desires to have a free, secular, democratic Middle East, instead, stop pushing the blame on us, because every time we do come out and conduct an uprising, no one says anything. They always say, why don't Iranians free themselves? And my answer is, for the same reason your corresponding governments continue to fucking rescue the regime's ass who are oppressing Iranians. And therefore, like, I go back to my point, we've already been at war for 46 years. This one just so happened to include missiles, and therefore the world's shouting and screaming only because it's Israel.
You know, it's dude. I mean, you're amazing. It's there's a lot. There's so much to take in. One thing I want to discuss is, like, it's our tax dollars that are rescuing the regime. It's our tax dollars that are being given by the billions to the regime, which then they use to fund Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and their own torture and mutilation and massacre of their own people within Iran. But you bring up a point where it's like you've been at war for almost 50 years, and in large part because that we've continued to bail them out and to save them, but no one's really seen it. No one said a word about it. We can even look in other areas of the Middle East and all over the world, but I mean, Bashar al-Assad slaughtered over 500,000 of his own people, and no one says a word about it. But they're talking about what's happening in Gaza, and they're like, 50,000, 60,000. Every innocent life is equally valid. I don't care where you're from. Every innocent life, including Gazans. But you're going to talk about this being the worst massacre of the Middle East? Well, literally over 600,000 Syrians have been slaughtered under Bashar al-Assad over the last decade. And, like, you have the gall and the audacity to say that this is the worst, and it's like, and then not even recognize how this whole thing started. Like, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. I want to ask your opinion. I'm not asking for, like, I know you're not a politician. You don't have the ability to make any of this happen. I want to know your thoughts on this, because I'm conflicted. It appears there is a ceasefire as of right now, which, for whatever it's worth, like, maybe it's because Israeli Jewish lived in Israel. Like, ceasefire, it doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean shit.
It's like, it means people are like, yeah, let's have a ceasefire. Like, you don't. All that means is that it's just a slight pause, and more people are gonna die later. It doesn't mean
the whole thing about, like, trying to pacify the evil that exists temporarily.
Yeah.
You eradicate the problem, completely.
Until you've either lived or have friends and family living in a place where missiles are flying on them every day, like, don't don't cheer for a ceasefire. Ceasefire is nonsense. It means nothing. But my internal conflict is this. I want the Iranian people to topple that regime, and I want them to pick their own leader, and I want them to have freedom and democracy, and that's what I want for the Iranian people. I also, every Israeli that I know, every single one, including those who are in the IDF, those who are in the Air Force, they don't want to stop. They want to help the Iranian people. But there's also the conflict of, do they want our help? Like, what is our responsibility? Like this, like, I don't know, dude. And I don't have the answers. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? Should Israel continue to go until this regime is fucked? Should they go after every single leader? Like, do you want the U.S. involved? Do you just want them to give the Iranian people in an underground capacity, like, hey, let's teach you how to fight, let's build you up, because that's obviously one of the reasons why they shut down communications, they shut down internet, so the Iranian people couldn't see the support that they were getting, they couldn't see how hurt the regime has been in this 12-day war. But like, what do you want in your ideal world? What do you think is right for the Iranian people to end this regime?
Okay. Very good question. Very broad, but again, I'll try and summarize it as best as I can. So right now we're at a very, very, very critical point, such that we're waiting for two things to happen. By words they've said ceasefire, but they're supposed to be negotiating some sort of deal within the next few days, possibly. So we're waiting for that to take place. And we're waiting to see what happens in order to be able to determine the next steps. The second thing that we're waiting for is a lot of people who fled Tehran, the capital city. We're waiting for them to come back, better gain internet access again, and see what takes place. In fact, right now as we speak, in the province of Hamadan, which is on the west side of Tehran, there's been a bit of protests and dissonance, basically having a go, and part of their chants is "Be ma goftan Amrika's, doshman ma haminjas," which is they keep telling us it's America, but our enemy is right here. Our enemy is within, being the regime. So hopes that can spark something. Now, one of two things can happen right now. There's literally two options, and I'm going to be very firm with this. One, they make a deal, and they make business deals, and they say to the regime, okay, you can't have nuclear weapons, but go on, continue with the business, continue with your terrorist proxies, just don't create nuclear weapons. And you know what's going to happen? The same cycle again and again.
Same thing. Yep.
As it goes for fucking almost 5 decades now. The Iranian people will suffer, and if anything, like I told you before, militarily and physically they might be weakened, but ideologically they have been strengthened astronomically. And when you strengthen a death cult-based ideology, and already as it is, they will take it out on the people, and it will become essentially North Korea on steroids, Iran as we know it. I'll be frankly honest with you. That's the first
believe
option. Second option, and this is where it gets somewhat controversial. Obviously, there's been a lot of debate within the Iranian community, within Iran, and within the Iranian community in the diaspora. I would actually argue that the diaspora community has been a little bit more anti-war compared to Iranians within Iran. Iranians within
Which
Iran
makes sense.
are actually more encouraging. Like, did you see when they blew up the state TV?
Dude, that was unbelievable.
Dude, I was fucking...
It was unbelievable.
I added that to my wank bank. I'm going to be honest with you.
In the middle of a broadcast, too.
Yeah.
In the middle of a... Dude, that was wild.
This is better than Pornhub. But anyway... okay, I'll just outline this sort of spectrum for you. You have on this side people and their hatred for the West and Israel supersedes their hatred for the regime. They identify as anti-regime, but their hatred for the West and Israel and the Jews supersedes the hatred for the regime. And then you have people on this side, like far on this side, where they say, nah, US intervention, Israel intervention, blow them up, take them in, boys, eagle emoji, eagle emoji, eagle emoji. I like to consider myself a little bit like center on this side and say that, look, when people say foreign intervention, what do they actually mean? Because we live in a geopolitical world where there is actually virtually no such thing as no foreign intervention. I go back to the point that I made earlier, when people want to complain about foreign intervention all the time, but foreign intervention has been taking place the past 46 years. How come you haven't said anything? All these Western governments, from Germany to France to the UK to America, constantly creating business deals for this regime. No one's saying anything. But the moment you have Israel taking out chief commanders of the IRGC, that's a big fucking deal. Like, bro, get the fucking job done already.
Just finish it. Finish it.
Take out Khomeini, people will rise, I promise you. So I guess where I would draw the line is actually a boots-on-ground invasion.
Agreed.
I'm all for taking out IRGC commanders, don't care, IRGC members, Basij members. And obviously there's a clear distinction between the actual Artesh, the military who protects the borders of Iran, versus the IRGC. The IRGC is the ideological paramilitary organization that is there to protect the Islamic regime and to expand the Islamic regime, which is completely separate to the actual military. And this is where there has been a platform set up by the Crown Prince Pahlavi for military members to defect from the regime on the down low. So this is where I get to the point where I'd answer your question regarding the second option. I've already outlined the first option, where deals are made, regime gets stronger, same cycle over again. Second option, no deals. The West and many governments, such as Australia, such as America, such as the West and the East as well, cut all ties with this regime. Enough is enough. They enable Iranians within Iran to conduct an uprising, to conduct labor strikes, and give them better internet accessibility. The UN finally acts and holds this regime to account. Whilst they're doing that, if Israel wants to take out the nuclear capability of the Islamic regime, go for gold. I'm all for it. They're protecting their own sovereign interest. I've got nothing to say about that. But Iranians within Iran must take their own ample opportunity to take this advantage, because this is the only chance that they're going to get. And then when you have individuals like Pahlavi himself, putting himself forth as a transitional leader with a team of constitutional lawyers and all these experts ready to go on the ground, this is it. This is the only hope we have. And this is where I go back to the whole mixture of emotions. Iranians right now, be it within and the diaspora, we've been suffering with this like massive mixture of emotions, from hope to happiness to sadness to anger to depression, a lack of sleep. It's just such a diversity. So it can go one of two ways. And my cynical self, to be honest with you, unfortunately, I think it's going to be the former. The West doesn't want to take the more risky route. They'd rather maintain their geopolitical ties, and thereby making Iranians to remain in this psychological vice once again. Because externally, as we've seen, the regime comes out and identifies as peaceful, with their foreign ministers and their ambassadors. they come across as nice guys. They look really nice with their sort of stubble and their smile and their sweet smile, but internally they take it out with their coercive force upon their own people. And that's my analysis of what I think will happen. So in fact, while we're talking right now, as of the 4th of July, it's a very critical point, and we have one of those two things that could possibly take place, and I'm going to hope that it's the latter. But according to the evidence that we've seen, people are too stupid to take this shit seriously, and history will repeat itself. As Aldous Huxley actually once beautifully said, and that people don't take the lessons of history seriously is the biggest lesson that we can learn from history itself. Not the exact quote, but something along the lines. I hope that makes sense.
But it's so true, man. It's so true. I mean, people only really want to learn about this when something big like this happens. But listen, it's you and I want to be very respectful of your time. You just said something that hit something in me. The UN.
Yeah.
Bro. The UN, I have so many issues with what they do and how they function, but I've never spoken to an Iranian about this. I mainly speak to Israelis and Americans about it, but I'm sure you've seen that the UN has time and again had Iran as the head of the Human Rights Council. And I mean, it's pretty wild that they not only allow, but they enable arguably the between China, Russia, Iran, whatever, but like one of the largest, greatest perpetrators of human rights violations to head the Human Rights Council, and especially like the Women's Rights Council. It's at this point, and I'm pretty cynical when it comes to all things government in general. I don't care what side it is, but like it just, I've lost all of my ability to objectively review what the UN does, and when they put people committing some of the worst crimes against humanity as the head of the Human Rights Council and fail time and again to hold them accountable for how they treat the Iranian people. And hopefully, for me, my optimistic side, or my hopeful side says, hopefully now people will pay more attention to Iran and how the people are suffering. My pessimistic side completely agrees with you and says the regime will stay in power. They will be ideologically strengthened. They will be hampered by several months, maybe a year or so in terms of capacity. And we will see this happen again, time and time and time again, until some brave Iranians are given the opportunity to take control over their land and their people, and God willing, that'll happen immediately. It'll happen soon. But the pessimistic side of me, the side of me that says the powers that run the world are focused on money and power and not focused on the actual lives of the innocent people who they're supposed to protect. It just, unfortunately, I don't think people are going to be paying attention to the people of Iran and giving support that they need. So, but brother, I think that you are absolutely incredible. I'm going to put your social media handle in the show notes so people can follow you, shoot you messages. Is there anything before we sign off that you'd like to leave with? Anything that you would encourage people to do? Anything that you want people to leave with before we sign off?
Brother, the only thing I can say, and I've said this to many Israelis, and I'll repeat myself, I think this communication and this bonding once more between Iranians and Israelis needs to be amplified. We saw it coming, and this had to have happened for us to do this. We need to speak up. There's just not enough advocates. There's just not enough activists. Please speak up. This is the time, because if not now, when? And if not us, then who? Don't wait for it to come behind your door before you speak up, because by then it's already going to be too late. And the second message I have for genuine Western liberals who really do genuinely care about human rights. Please, if you care about Iranians and Iran, speak to Iranians. Stop listening to the propaganda. And I say this with the utmost respect and kindness that I mean. I mean it. Please speak to us, because it hurts us, to say the least, when you speak on our behalf without actually coming to us beforehand. And that's probably it. I can say much more, but I'll leave it as that.
Man, I love you, man. I hope you know if you ever make your way to Dallas, you always have a place to stay. You always have a home with me. I appreciate you immensely. As things develop, I'd love to bring you back on, hear your thoughts continually as things happen. And dude, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, brother. Peace and blessings to you. Love you. Thanks for having me.